What's up, folks? It's your man Ron Headback, and welcome back to the DarkLab. It's been a while, but this time we're going to be doing some lo-fi and ambient house. It's going to sound a bit like this. And you can download all these combinators to put into your own tracks. So let's dive into the rack and we'll see how we're building this. Now, if you're a fan of lo-fi and tracks like Winona by DJ Boring, you'll notice that they start in this really simple space of just a nice droning and kind of tape wobbled chord. Now, how we're doing this is we're using Grain, which is really, really good for those kind of just stretching out and elongating any chord sound that you have. So we'll just check it out just on its own first without the wobble. Pretty simple, it sounds quite nice, but we want that kind of lo-fi tapey kind of retro sound. So what we're using here is we have Ripley, which we've been having a lot of fun with. It has just its built-in wobbler feature, which is pretty cool. And what we're doing here is on 3/16. Normally for this kind of wobble effect, you're not going to use so much feedback. I'm just kind of washing things out a bit because it is lo-fi, and it is pretty neat that you have the noise feature as well. So you can get that kind of tapey hiss that's going on. So we'll just switch this on. We'll just check what it's like. Now, what I've done is I've mapped the wobble up to a controller here. So you can just have as much wobble or as little as you like. Don't want to go too crazy with it and things wobbling around all over the place, but that might be the vibe that you're going for, so you can kind of check it. Now, what we're also going to be doing with this is sometimes when you're switching the sync rates on delay, you get that kind of like you know, like the tape is just kind of chewing up a bit, this kind of style. I dig that, and I was wanting to get a way to kind of use it. But the thing is it doesn't really kind of fit in time and things like that. So a kind of neat thing that you can actually do with Grain is you can get a kind of similar effect. Now, what you want to do here is with the oscillator, you're going to set your waveform to the random one, like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to control the modulation of this to come through the envelope, and I've just drawn a really messy pattern here, but you can use some of the presets that are there. So what this is going to be doing is, if you notice in the matrix here, this envelope is going to be controlled by the oscillator mod. Now, if this all sounds pretty confusing, pretty much you're switching on the oscillator and then you're cranking up the modulation rate. And this kind of gives a nice chewed tape kind of feel. So just adding to that kind of nice tapey feel. And next up, what we have is, if you want to just kind of go a step further with that kind of noisy tape feel, is we have a Thor that's just running concurrent with the Grain. And this is if you're getting things to go really lo-fi, as we have here noisy tape. So what this is, maybe a little bit too much, but what this is this is a Thor with just a white noise preset. So if you want to really go overboard and have that kind of layer of fuzz going on in the background, you know, you can crank this up, but use it sparingly. So we're going to be looking at our main chord, and I'm calling this one Crying Chord, and you know, keep on watching, you'll find out why. Now, this is coming to us courtesy of Europa. It's just one of the standard presets that's in there. It's called Indie Gamer. Now, we're going to be doing a whole bunch of stuff with this, you know, so grab an aspirin, we'll get through together. You can download this and you can find out how it's working. But a thing that I want to start with that's a kind of little, maybe a little hidden feature that some of you kind of haven't picked up on. sometimes when you're using chord sequencer, you may be kind of bashing away on the pads and maybe something's not working out for you, or you have some kind of MIDI from a pack or something that you've been working with, you quite like. But in this case, I had the grain chord at the beginning. I really liked it, so I exported it and had an audio to MIDI converter and then brought that into Reason. Now, what I've actually got here is, you see, I've got actually MIDI from the drone chord. It wasn't exactly perfectly working the way I wanted, so I kind of messed around with it a bit. But because I have this in MIDI, I'm not going to get all the advantages of chord sequencer, you know, for example, routing the root note out and other CV features. But this is a neat little thing that you can have when you're getting into that kind of situation. I'm just going to reset this device and put it onto empty. And what you want to do is go to Edit and then Learn. And then this is actually going to record in the chords that you have here in MIDI. So we'll just go back to the rack and we're going to have to like switch as it moves on to the next chord. So you see the kind of thing that I'm doing here if we just get a split view. Just click off Learn and then Edit Chord. And then what we have is just that MIDI chord and we can play around with it in Chord Sequencer. We could even be taking copies of that and put it into the next one here, paste, transpose it up a little touch. So, you know, I'm sure you've all got these MIDI packs or just like bits of MIDI sitting around and, you know, maybe the vibe that you're wanting, you're not quite getting it with Chord Sequencer. So there's some little hacks for you for getting those chords into Chord Sequencer. Now, with our indie gamer Europa chord, we're going to be doing a bit of kind of parallel processing. If you're not familiar with this, you can go and check out some other videos and you'll see how that's done. And plus as well, you have the combinator to download and play with. So what we have here is just the completely clean, natural version of the Europa. So we'll check that. Now, we want to really celebrate those chords and just have it kind of really stretching across our mix. So first up, we have what I'm calling choral wobble. And this is coming to us via the Echo and Audiomatic. So we'll just listen to this on its own. Now, what we're doing here is with the Echo, we're doing quite a similar kind of tape wobble effect. It's not just exclusive to Ripley, but it's pretty handy the way it has it in Ripley. So you have to do some little tweaks with the Echo. What you have to do is you take the delay time right down, take everything right down there and the feedback, and you're on here with the wobble and you're wanting to kind of season that to taste with your dry and wet. So what we're getting here is a kind of copy of our chord, but it's kind of gently wobbling away. We'll add some more. So that's a kind of neat wobble that's going on there. A thing that we kind of want to do as well is because it starts to get a little bit thin. So we'll bring in Audiomatic with the setting bottom on, and that really thickens it out. And like I was saying, we kind of really want to kind of celebrate and get as much as we can out of this chord. So what we're going to be doing next is we have a polar. Now this is just one of the standard settings that's in the library, and this is called Bright White 7. And I've just kind of done some little tweaks here. Now shifter 1 is set to 7 semitones, and then shifter 2 also set to 7. And what that's going to kind of give us is a kind of 7th jump to things. So we'll check that. Now, naturally, the chords that you're using, it might not fit a 7th, but that's where you can kind of tweak the shifter so you can maybe put it to a 5th or a 3rd. So when we layer that up, with our choral wobble and the clean signal, we're really getting a really rich chord like so. Now, when I got to this stage with doing the track, I was kind of like, well, I want to move on and do a lead for this. But then I kind of had that what if moment and just like, what could I use that's like Reason off-label usage? Take something, grab it, put it in, see how it works. And in this case, it was BVX. Now, there's a preset in there called Carrier Pad, and I kind of messed around with this a touch. What this is doing is it's kind of generating, of all things, a lead for us. I kind of lucked in on this one because it's like I was planning on making a lead anyway, then sticking this in, and it's just like it came out really sweet. So we're just going to check what this is like so. I'll bring it in slow. Now, how this is working is within here, we're carving out all the bottom end of the sound. So it's just the higher EQ that's being used. And here with the synth carrier, what this is doing is the harmonic mix, it's going to be taking up the 7th, the 12th, and plus 12th, 7th. And that's kind of generously nudging them up. So what BVX is doing is it's just giving you, it's cutting out all that low end, and then it's really bringing things up into the sky. What we actually do is we take the mod and the carrier down, but you can dial that in a touch, but we already have a kind of couple of copies of our chords. Now, of course, all this is coming through Ripley, and we've got a generous 316 here with delay. We're not doing that much. Again, we're kind of carving out the higher end of things. And it was kind of strange. I was kind of wondering if I could bounce this around a touch. So I use rotor. Without it, it sounds a bit softer. But with rotor on there, it's giving it a bit of crunch and a bit of kind of like slightly lo-fi sound. So you can use that one season to taste. So who'd have thunk it? You know, you can just go and take your chord, stick BVX on it and carve out those low end frequencies, have the harmonics of the synth carrier, really bring it up, and you've just generated yourself a lead. And another really cool thing is playing with the formant on this, as you kind of get like slight crazy things going on with the BVX. So I've just put the controllers up here, and we'll just see how that's just sounding. It's quite nice to take that really high up and then to see it stepping down with the, I've called this one cry format, because it's just a kind of, you know, it's a nice rich chord, but then there's this kind of crying, tinkling going on at the top. So with that really rich chord, this is just begging to have a bass line with it. Now, what we're doing here is I've got a nice fat sub that's coming on with the monotone. Now, pretty basic stuff here, and it's the usual of, you know, taking bassline generator and then syncing the root note CV in, and that's coming from the actual chord sequencer. We just come down here, just that's root note CV in, and then that is going to the root note out of the chord sequencer, and that's kind of keeping our bassline in key with things. Now we'll just check it on its own. We have also a bit of scream here. We'll just disable this so you can sound like when it's on its own. Now that's kind of sounding a touch flat. We might want to kind of have that as a lull or an introduction. But if we come and bring the bassline generator through no echo, what we have here is a step length sync of 1/4, and then we're taking the pitch up by 12 semis, and that's just kind of adding a nice bounce to our sound. We've just got a controller there for you, bounce, so you can disable and enable. So we'll just bring this on. So it's a far more interesting rolling bass line. And if you really want to kind of have things riched up, we have the scream here, and this is using tape of all things because we're going lo-fi, and that you'll notice the difference here of this enabled and disabled. So that really deepens things up. So, okay, this is going to have a beat put on it, and this is where we're going to be using a drum machine that I bet you none of you are touching. So for our beat, do you want to take a guess at what we're using? Just check it. Boom. Nope. For this, we are using Rhythmic. Now, the reason I'm using this is because I think it's kind of overlooked, and this kind of reminds me of a situation like back in the day when I was writing tracks, trying to find drum machines. You know, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, everyone had been going out and buying all the secondhand drum machines they could find, like 909s and 808s. So whenever I was passing a secondhand store, the minute I would see a drum machine, it would be like, a drum machine, buy it, check it out, see what it's like. So if this was one of my first drum machines, and that is a Zoom Rhythm Track RT123. Now, it wasn't the best, but it wasn't the worst, and it got kind of interesting sounds out of it. And the kind of ethos with this was, it's just like I would put it into guitar pedals, I would mess around with it, I would pitch it, and I would get some pretty interesting beats out of it. And that's kind of similar with Rhythmic here, because I don't know if the guys at Reason, when they were designing this, they had some of those drum machines in mind. But that's it's pretty cool for kind of like getting that older school kind of sound. And the kicks in it are pretty darn good. Like there's a nice 909 kick here. That's really meaty. So with our beat, we're just going to start out with the kick. And quite often when I'm doing sort of lo-fi stuff, I want to kind of have these really boisterous beats, and you kind of have a double tap here at the beginning, not all the time. I've got that on 50% probability, and then a kind of little triplet at the end, kind of to give things a bit of a knock, 63% and 48%, so you get this kind of feel. Now with that, what we're going to want to do is bring in our hi-hats, so we'll just have this. And these are just kind of very simple hats, but I'm kind of getting a little bit of a kind of cha-cha-cha here towards the end. And that's just taking, again, probability 64, 48, 42, and then that's just on our last hat. So it kind of sounds like this. Now, of course, we're going to need our clap. And for this one, just using one of the standard claps that we've got in there, and we're kind of on in between our first and second clap, we've got the kind of that double snap, so that's going to sound like this. Now, like that old Zoom Rhythm Track, Rhythmic has got some pretty crazy toms and bongos. So we have here, we have a low conga, and we have a high conga like this. Now, another kind of cool thing with Rhythmic is, and you'll notice there, things are kind of sounding a bit off, and that's because we're using a delay at 1/4, and that's dotted. So it's kind of be a bit out of time. So we'll just check this all together. Now, no beat is complete without its effects. This one I've kind of been a bit crazy because I really wanted to mash things up. So first up, we just have a bit of reverb just to kind of add some space in the background. That's using reverb, all going to church, but cranking up the wet, so giving it a bit of space and room. You hear there that high conga already is sounding a bit more interesting. What we want to do next, and this is kind of really roughing things up, is we're taking a layer of this through Audiomatic and we're using the cracked preset. Kind of with this, be a bit sparing because, you know, it can really begin to kind of crack and crunch. So and that's really giving flavor to those low and high congos. Now, just to take it a step further, as if it needs it, but, you know, I just wanted to do it because Audiomatic with the cracked preset is kind of taking things a bit lower. But if you use with Scream, with the warp setting, which a lot of folk might not use because it just sounds too noisy, is just doing a bit of a low cut, boosting the mid, and just a touch on the high. That is sounding like so. So there you go. Who'd have thought it? If you're using Rhythmic, you can get some really lo-fi, grungy beats to accompany your track. Now, I was really keen to use Polytone when it came out, but I just couldn't decide because there's so many different sounds. There's so many pads and basses and plucks and leads and such like. And for this track, I wanted to kind of have another lead that was going to accentuate that kind of tinkling, crying chord that we had in Europa. But I couldn't really decide. I was like, okay, I want to use a pad. I want to use a lead. I'm not too sure. So again, kind of off-label usage. Remember our bass line that we used with the sub? We'll just jump up to that. Sometimes you can get quite interesting melodic elements by using bassline generator. This was just 16 steps. If we jump down what I'm calling poly tiers, because again, it's a kind of crying sound. Is I'm actually just using a string, one of the presets here. We'll just check it out. It's kind of rather subdued, mellow sounding string there. But I was kind of, well, I need something kind of leady. So what I've done with that bassline generator pattern is just crank this up to 32 steps. We'll just kind of play this back because sometimes it's kind of interesting to take a bassline and put it through a string or a pad. So first up like this. It's still sounding a bit stringy. So what I'm doing with this is I'm taking it through a polar to kind of richen things up because it's still sounding quite low. And this is using sevens and octaves. What it has here is on the shifter 1, 7 semis, and then on the next shifter, that's 12. So this is sounding like so. I kind of want to have that a bit staccato because we kind of want a bit more rhythmic and melodic. What better to use for that than a bit of alligator? So we just check this. So there's a kind of nice dancing, jangling kind of little lead we have there. And another kind of thing that's pretty neat with Polytone is, you know, using the A/B and seeing, you know, for the layer balance, because, you know, you can kind of get some different sounds on those. This one, just playing with the filter was making things a bit too noisy, but if I was playing on the B, it was kind of sounding a bit more interesting. What I'm doing here, because I wanted to have those mid-tones to be accentuated from the alligator, like so. See how it's just pulsing there. It was the more frequent pulse that was going on. So what I have here is the CV output from that gate 2. I'm going to bring that in. Now I'm just using robotic bean here to, you know, control and mute things. But basically that gate 2 is coming to the mix morph of the polytone. So as you'll kind of see, now that I've enabled this, I just had it muted there. As I enable it, you'll see how it kind of switches on and off sharply. And you can see here the A and B flicking to and fro. So that's sounding a bit more accentuated on the B layer, and bringing up the filter frequency on the B layer, it kind of sharpens things out a touch. And of course, to really add to all that jangle, we're using 3-against-4 with Ripley. This time, I'm not going to use the wobble, but I could. It kind of gets things jangling a bit too much. And here we're kind of using a ping pong with 3/16 and 1/4. So that's really making things dance around. So that's really making things dance around, and we'll bring it in with our kind of crying chord and our drone from the original and see how that's kind of pairing things up. So that's adding a nice alternative to the kind of crying lead that we had generated via BVX. So that's a kind of, we could have that as a lull or just a kind of different point in the track. Now, a real signature of kind of lo-fi tracks, and it kind of gets that tapey nostalgic feel, is those kind of stretched or wonky lyrics. And you kind of want to have things that are either really pitched down or really pitched up. Now, for this, I'm using Mimic. If you've just been using Mimic just for kind of dropping samples in and just playing it, and that's all you're using it for, stop and try the multi-slice mode and the speed settings and the vocal stretch on this with the formants, because you get some really interesting stuff. This was what this vocal originally sounded like. It was pretty kind of harsh, but what I did here with this is just taking the speed up a touch, but then really jacking up the formant of it, and that is sounding like so. We just bring that in. Now that is from a far, longer sample. There's a whole lot going on in this one. Check here. So with the multi-slice mode, you can really just be taking little bits and parts of the song, and then as you're going on to another slice, you can copy in the same vocal track, but then kind of pitch it down, pitch the speed down, and then the formant down, so you're getting... So you can get some kind of really interesting ranges with that going on. Also, just jumping back to that, female vocal that's going on, is you can bring in polar and take the shifter right down, and you're kind of getting a male accompaniment to the female vocal. So what I've done here is the volume of shifter 1, that is the lower version, that is going to just increase here on what the dial called male, and that's just going to bring up the volume of this. You get this kind of vibe. So I'm sure you'll agree that's some real nice sounds to layer together. If you like this track, you can go and grab it from my Bandcamp, or better yet, the combinators are there for you to download and you can make something yourself. So I hope this gives you many reasons for using Reason. I'll catch you in the next side. Peace, and we'll play this one out.